And a very happy Friday to you at 12:08 in the West. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wangs at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, when the NFL wins a Super Bowl, President Joe Biden is there to greet them at the White House. When a baseball team wins the World Series, President Joe Biden is there to greet them at the White House. When an NBA team wins the championship, President Joe Biden is there to greet them at the White House. But when the WNBA has a champion team like the Las Vegas Aces, they get Kamala because the Bidens snubbed them.
Good afternoon. Well, let me just thank everyone here for all that you do to support this extraordinary team and all the leaders who are here. President Biden and Dr. Biden could not join us today, but I will tell you they always make sure that we keep the People's House open to our nation's athletes and champions.
What's the next line in the speech? It could be worse. He could have left you in Russia, too.
Dr. Biden must have been on an important medical call.
Oh, yes. I think she was being paged for surgery.
President Biden and Dr. Biden.
Maybe she'll be the next leader of L.A. Public Health.
Well, she's got more credentials than the current one.
Next slide.
800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about the crime here in the state of California, whether it's the smash and grabs at the department stores, whether it is the carjackings, the follow-home robberies, anything happening in Oakland, which seems to be on a daily basis. We bring the stories to you. And not long ago, I told you that while watching the news with a room full of Brazilians, they told me that California is starting to remind them of Brazil. It's a beautiful place with beautiful people and an amazing culture, great food, phenomenal views, everything you would want in a country, with the exception of the fact that you have to have barbed wire around your house and a moat filled with alligators if you don't want to be robbed. And don't bother stopping at a stoplight because if you do, you might get carjacked. That's life in Brazil, according to the people I know who have lived there and travel back and forth all of the time. And it's a future I don't want for the state of California. It's a future we can certainly avoid if we put our minds to it and do the basics of running a state government. It doesn't have to be that way. Unfortunately, it's the daily lives that we live, but we can make some changes at some point. It's not an act of God that created our environment. It is done by man, and anything that can be broken by man can be fixed by man. We've seen this happen before in the 1990s when we had a crime spike with the crack cocaine epidemic, and then you brought in the three strikes mentality, and suddenly things went back to normal in California, and property values shot through the roof. Unfortunately, as I look at the national news today, I've been saying to myself, it doesn't remind me of Brazil. It reminds me of Venezuela. And I say it reminds me of Venezuela because a very good friend of mine is from there. And his family actually was part of the government in Venezuela before Hugo Chavez and company took over. And he tells me the stories all the time as to what happened to his family. His family was a family that served their government in various capacities, high-ranking officials, top officials in the previous administration. And when Hugo Chavez took over the government there, many of his relatives had to flee the country because they feared being shot and killed. Those that stuck around were thrown in prison. They, of course, had trials, and they were convicted, and that was the end of them. And up until very recently, they were incarcerated. They just got out, his relatives that were put in prison. And I don't even know how that happened, but somehow they were able to get out. And he has warned me time and time and time again about how awful and tyrannical that government is, and stay far away from anything resembling what's going on in Venezuela. and don't think that that government can't spread to other parts of the world, because it can. And now he has devoted his life to trying to topple those governments when they abuse their power and abuse their authority. Last night, a former president had to turn himself in to a jail in Fulton County, Georgia, because he's being charged with, I think it's the fourth time different prosecutors around the country are charging him with crimes, wanting to put him in prison for what would effectively be the rest of his life and eliminate him as a candidate for the presidency. Right now, he's leading the Republican primary by 50 points to the last poll I saw. So what they would do is they would take the Republican frontrunner and eliminate him as a possibility to be the Republican nominee in the 2024 presidential election. It used to be, when you had a beef with your political opponents, the process played out in the political arena. They hate President Trump with the hot, hot hate of 1,000 suns. They don't like the cut of his jib. They don't like anything about him. They see him as being dangerous, and they don't want him anywhere near the White House, and they don't want him anywhere near the levers of power. Despite the fact that they pound him on a daily basis, he's done all right in the polls. As I said, he's way ahead in the Republican primary, and he's either leading Joe Biden or within the margin of error in the general election. And when you factor in the Electoral College, if you're even close as a Republican, that is essentially an even-Steven race. And that is freaking them out. And they don't want any part of that. And instead of chancing it in the general election, because anytime you win a major party nomination, you have a 50-50 shot at becoming the next president of the United States, they've decided that they want to take care of it now, because if they take care of it now, then they don't have to worry about that possibility in November of 2024. What they're doing is an abuse of power. And they're taking this country into a very dark place. The 2024 election is going to be as dark of an election as you've seen in your lifetime. Possibly the darkest election, I predict, that I have certainly seen in my lifetime. I think we're headed there. And one of the subjects that we talk about on this show all the time is an abuse of power, is government corruption. We talk about it on a daily basis. We live here in California where that's just part of the news. And there's really two different types of government corruption that dominate the headlines. One is a type of corruption that you do to enrich yourself and your friends, and the other is a type of corruption that you do to punish your enemies. We're used to the first one. Most of what we see on a day-to-day basis in California is the first one, and we all know how this works. You get elected to, let's say, the LA County Board of Supervisors. You have a budget. Part of what you have to do is make sure that your district has the infrastructure and the services that it needs so that your people can go to work and raise their families and move from point A to point B. So you go in there and you say, I'm going to build this bridge. Fine. You build the bridge. That's what politicians are supposed to do. And then what they do is they take it to the next level. I'm going to build this bridge, and I want you to hire my friend. Okay? Perfectly legal. Maybe not the way we'd like it to happen, but perfectly legal. And then they take it to the next level. I'm going to build this bridge. I want you to hire my friend, and my friend is going to hire my spouse, my children, my friends, my neighbor, my mistress, fill in the blank. Also, perfectly legal as long as you do it the right way. Where they get in trouble, where they always get in trouble, is when they say, I'm going to build this bridge. I want you to hire my friend. My friend is going to hire my spouse, my child, my neighbor, my mistress, my friend from childhood. And I want money to come back to me. We've seen it happen with poker chips. We've seen it happen with salaries for children. We've seen it happen in any number of ways. And when the money finds its way back to them, that's when they get in trouble. But what we've seen in recent years, and every politician knows that if the money finds its way back to you, that's when someone's going to blow the whistle when you cut them out of the deal and they're angry and they know they have the goods on you and you go to jail. But what's happened recently is that our local politicians do all of this. They know they've crossed the legal line. Certainly they've crossed the ethical line. But they feel morally justified doing what they're doing because they feel that they're giving these goodies to people who deserve it. And as long as the people getting the ill-gotten gains deserve it, then they're justified in doing it. Mark Ridley Thomas honestly believes he did nothing wrong. Sheila Kuehl believes she did nothing wrong. I have no idea what Jose Huizar thinks, but I would imagine he believes he did nothing wrong. From their point of view, they're doing what everyone else does. They're just giving the stuff to different people, and they're giving the stuff to their people. So if you blow the whistle, you're punishing them for giving stuff to their people, and how dare you do that? Complete 100% moral justification. When you look at the other type of corruption, where you use your power to punish your enemies, what we're seeing is the same type of justification. It doesn't matter what we're doing with our power because we're morally justified. We cannot let Donald Trump get anywhere near the White House because, after all, he was responsible for January the 6th. And you know what? What he did on January the 6th was awful, and he is going to have to answer for that in the primary and the general election. That is a political liability that he is going to have to get beyond if he is going to win the primary and win the general. There's no doubt about that. But it's a political liability. To then take it and say, I'm going to put you in jail because of that, and take it out of the hands of the voters, that's an abuse of power. And it's an abuse of power with moral justification, just like how they have moral justification when they steal money from you. And because they can't tolerate any kind of dissent, what they're doing to Trump, they wouldn't hesitate a second to do to you too. We've seen this happen at school boards. When you have parents that show up and they don't like that CRT is being taught, or they don't like the gender ideology, or fill in the blank, whatever the issue is and whatever that local community is, they're a voting citizen. They pay their taxes. They have kids in the school. They want to show up and make their opinion heard. What happens? The government declares them to be a terrorist and ruins their life. Would you want it in the paper that you're a terrorist? I wouldn't. Would you assume that by showing up to a school board meeting and voicing your opinion that you are pledging your allegiance to Al-Qaeda? No. They probably didn't think that that was in the realm of possibilities. And that's what's happening. They view them as dangerous, so they use their power to make sure they have zero opportunity to do that ever again. Look what the fake doctor and Adam Schiff tried to do to me. They thought I was dangerous for telling you that Barbara Ferrer is not a medical doctor. So they went around and colluded with one another to try to get me kicked off Twitter with executives in Silicon Valley. They felt morally justified doing that because they thought I was dangerous for telling you something that is factually true. She is a fake doctor, and I will say that until the day I die.
Yeah.
But they felt justified. Just like how they felt justified stealing from you. And I'll tell you, it's very easy if you're part of the group that's being targeted to say, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. When we take back control of power and we take back control of the government, I'm going to take all of these arms of government that have been used against me, and I'm going to turn them around on my enemies, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to them. And let me tell you, I'm not an attorney, and there are plenty of people on this planet who are much smarter than me. But if you gave me the power of the executive branch of government, I could dig through the files of any member of Congress, any district attorney, anyone in public life, and find something that you did that's illegal and put you in prison. People tell little white lies all the time. You say you weigh 190 pounds when you really weigh 220. People do that on the dating apps. People do that to their own doctor. People lie about their age. Hell, look at these members of Congress. They lie about their ethnicity. And spouses of Alec Baldwin. People tell little white lies all the time. Well, when you work for the federal government, if you say something that's not true on one of those documents from the Treasury Department when you're doing your disclosures or whatever, that's a federal crime. So if you have all of the unlimited resources that the federal government has to offer and you dig through everyone's file, I could put Adam Schiff in prison. I could put Barbara Ferrer in prison. I could put Joe Biden in prison. I could put Hunter Biden in prison. I could put Merrick Garland in prison. I could put Hillary Clinton in prison. And you know what? They deserve it. And it would feel really good. And I could do it. But that's not the world you want to live in. That's not the world that you want to leave to the next generation of people. That's not a country you want to own a home in. That's not a country you want to raise your kids in. That's Venezuela. That's what happens there. Every time there's an election, if you don't win, you go to prison. If you don't win, you flee the country. If you don't win, maybe you even get murdered. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, because of the accumulation of these abuses of power, there are going to be a lot of people who want to take over government and use the power of government to go after their enemies. Whether they know it or not, they're playing with fire. And they need to tone it down. They need to settle down. They need to let the political process play itself out. If Donald Trump is the monster that they claim he is, then they shouldn't have any trouble beating him. But beat him at the ballot box. Don't beat him by abusing your power. Yesterday, we told you about the crazy meeting they had at LA City Hall where they discussed whether or not they were going to approve the new contract for the LAPD. Well, ultimately, they cobbled together the votes to approve the contract, but not before a raucous meeting.
That's right, where 12 members of the LA City Council voted to approve the police contract that Karen Bass negotiated with the police union. 3 members, that being Ulysses, Hugo, and Nithya, voted no. And were very adamant about how we can't fund the police because if we fund the police, I can't pave a sidewalk. One of the more interesting exchanges was from someone who voted yes, but had very strange reasonings for it. And it is brand new member of the LA City Council in District 6, my city councilwoman, Imelda Padilla, who in the middle of talking about whether or not she was going to approve the contract, wanted to give a shout out to her brother, who's in prison.
You know, today it is my older brother's birthday. He will be turning 41, and I believe we are now at year 19 that he has been incarcerated. And it is because of the experience that I had with losing him back in 2015 that I have dedicated my career to doing things on the preventative side of keeping young people out of incarceration. And trying my best to do things related to reducing the school-to-prison pipeline, because I truly believe that it was the schools, the status of the schools, and the lack of social services that led him into such a destiny.
Okay. The math didn't really add up, but maybe the school screwed her over, too.
Well, it was really interesting, all the things she was laying out there, because the first I had ever heard of it, that she has a brother who's incarcerated. So I did some digging, and according to the California Department of Corrections, there are 2 Antonio Padillas that are currently serving time in the California prison system. And I was able to find news information on one of them, and that's the one we told you yesterday that we thought might be Imelda's brother, the guy who went on a high-speed chase and attacked a police dog. Well, yesterday, after the show, we got an email from someone who's definitely in the know because they sent me a case file. They sent it anonymously, but it's to the other Antonio Padilla, who he believes is Imelda's brother. And it's one who's been in prison since 2005 for 4 counts of attempted first-degree murder with multiple firearm and gang allegations.
Wow, those schools really did fail him.
So either way, he's a high-speed chasing dog puncher or he's a murderer. Not sure which one it is, but it's one of them that Imelda was so inspired by that she had to get into politics so she could do something about the school-to-prison pipeline.
Well, how did LAUSD ruin his life to the point to where he tried to kill someone in the first degree?
Unclear.
Does he really hate square-shaped pizza that much?
So that's Imelda's story. Now, there's another new member of the LA City Council, but it's not like Ulysses, and it's not like Hugo, and it's not like Nithya. It's Tracy Park, who's been on this show several times. From Venice, she replaced Mike Bonin. She emphatically wanted to support the police because, well, have you seen what's been going on the last couple of years? And she got heckled for it by the DSA crowd that filled up the halls of the LA City Council. Would you like to hear that, Johnny?
Let's hear it.
This contract demonstrates a commitment to our police officers that's long overdue. And it sends a message that Los Angeles takes public safety seriously. We're not just going to put up with crime, and it means that we actually care about the men and the women who work hard every day to keep us safe. So I'm not just voting yes today. I'm keeping my promise, and I'm standing up for my constituents, our police officers, and our entire city by voting yes on public safety. I urge all of you to join me in making this long-term investment, and I ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Damn.
I love the fact that Imelda Padilla was talking about her brother being in the penitentiary for 19 years, and you could hear a pin drop in the room. She talks about wanting to bring back public safety to Los Angeles, and it sounds like an episode of Jerry Springer.
And you know what's about to happen next, right, Johnny?
What's that?
Paul, you ready?
Thank you.
You know, Sergeant, who's shouting out? Is it the guy in the mustard shirt? He's been warned multiple times. Please remove him from the meeting pursuant to Rule 12. Sir, you're excluded from the meeting pursuant to Rule 12. You've been warned multiple times. You continue to do it. Leave the meeting. You're ordered to leave the meeting immediately and silently. You've been warned by me multiple times, and also, but it doesn't matter what your name is. You're continuing to disrupt the meeting. Mr. Gravener, sit down. It doesn't matter. You're ordered excluded from the meeting for continuing to disrupt this meeting. Leave the meeting. I've also warned you multiple times in the last 2 sentences, and you're continuing to disrupt the meeting. Leave immediately.
That was one of the longest bleeps in the history of the LA City Council.
There were a lot of things being said because the people who attended the city council meeting don't like cops.
He needs to have a button where he presses the button, and it's the sound effect of Janice Hahn giving them their final warning.
That's your final warning.
You know what? I should email that to Paul Krikorian. He could use it.
He definitely needs some help. Going through the sound of the bonkers meeting down at LA City Hall where the cops got a raise.
We've heard from 2 of the 3 detractors. We heard Nithya complaining she can't do her job because of police. We heard Ulysses say that your kids won't be safe because of police. Now it's time for the man who represents Hollywood, Hugo Soto Martinez. Can I get a round of applause?
Yeah, clap that up.
Okay, let's move on.
I know this because last year we allocated an unprecedented amount of money for unarmed solutions for all these everyday issues. We have a shared vision of where mental health calls answered by clinicians, where neighborhood conflicts are handled by unarmed professionals, where public nuisances are dealt with community ambassadors. We all have this vision.
Do we?
We've been trying it, and it hasn't worked. In fact, crime has exploded.
I don't think Tracy Park has this same vision.
Where public nuisances are dealt with community ambassadors. We all have this vision. So why now are we approving a police contract that raises...
Notice how you can hear the disgust in his word when he says police?
He really does hate the cops.
So why now are we approving a police contract that raises officer salaries an additional $1 billion over the next 4 years? By the end of this contract, the starting salary of a police officer will be $97,363.
That's still too low.
Here's a question, Randy. How do you think the 3 anti-police votes on the council would have voted if their vote would have made the difference one way or the other?
That's an interesting point.
Because they can talk about wanting safety ambassadors and compassion for the homeless and unarmed individuals showing up for, I guess, mental breakdowns or however you want to describe it. It's another thing if you're the vote that kills the deal and then the city doesn't have a police force that's equipped to protect its residents. And even their constituents would flip out if that were to happen.
Oh, yeah. They would get blamed for it, and rightly so.
By the end of this contract, the starting salary of a police officer will be $97,363.
Right now, the starting salary for an LA City Councilman is $225,000. Maybe you should take a pay cut, jackass.
You know what? If it was $220,000 to be a cop, I wouldn't take that job. Because you put your life on the line every single day, and you work for a city that you know is going to throw you under the bus if you enforce the laws they have on the books.
If that was the starting salary of a mental health professional or a homeless outreach worker in the city of Los Angeles, how different would our city look? But I also have to be honest.
Does he truly believe this, or is it just because he wants to divert all the money to his friends' organizations?
If you go to any school of social work in the United States, what he is saying is what they're taught in all of those lecture halls. This is something that has been going on for a while in academia. It's just usually those conversations stay on college campuses. But now that these people are getting elected to office, they're bringing that mentality with them, and they truly do think that this is the modern science. They really, truly do think this will work because that's what they were taught in those schools. Well, it takes a lot of education to be that dumb.
But I also have to be honest. There are people out there that do terrible things. There are people who act from a place of hate. As we have seen the increase of hate crimes across the city, there are people that commit violence to those who have another race, sexual orientation, or religion. For those people who engage in those acts, we should seek restorative justice. But the reality is that LAPD...
Wait, he can't even say prison for hate crimers?
No, they need... What's the key word, Randy?
Accountability.
That's right.
The LAPD data showed that 92% of the calls that LAPD handles are not these kinds of crimes. The vast majority of these calls are nonviolent.
Well, they start nonviolent, and then they get violenter.
And they also play very fast and loose with what they describe as nonviolent. First of all, we reclassified a bunch of crimes like domestic violence and elder abuse and discharging a gun on a school campus from being violent to nonviolent. But also, if you commit a crime when you're on probation for doing something violent, they don't regard that as being a violent crime either.
The vast majority of these calls are nonviolent.
Most dangerous call a cop can go on is usually a domestic violence call, and those are happening all the time, Hugo.
In other words, we are putting all this money into the wrong system.
What we need, a domestic violence call where a husband's got a shotgun and he just punched his wife in the face. We need a mental health counselor.
Oh, yeah. Let's send Dr. Phil.
I repeat, we need to put this money into a system that addresses the root causes of crime.
What is it with these politicians when they want to do nothing about a problem? They always say, well, I'm not worried about that. I'm tackling the root causes.
And we all know the crime is down. So why?
What?
What city are you living in, dude?
And we all know the crime is down.
No, it's not.
So
do you watch the news?
So why spend so much money to...
Here's what they're going off of. The murder rate is slightly lower than last year, and that's the only crime that seems to matter. Doesn't matter that everything else is through the roof, and they don't give a crap about property crime.
No, and people have just stopped calling 911. So can you imagine what the real numbers are?
So why spend so much money to hire and retain more police officers? This contract...
Because we're losing about 1,000 every year?
Because no one wants to work for you, Hugo.
This contract was negotiated to address the lack of hiring and retention in the LAPD. But multiple police officers have told me personally in this capacity that it's not an issue of money. It's an image problem. That is the most honest thing that I have heard from the police department.
You mean like when Eric Garcetti called them killers?
I'm calling BS on that, by the way. I don't think any cops talk to him.
No. Why would they?
And this image problem is not unique to the city of Los Angeles. This is happening nationwide. People just don't want to be police officers anymore.
Yeah, why is that, Hugo?
If only we could spitball and find the answer.
If you want to fix that, it means not making LAPD the primary responder to homelessness and not using them as the de facto social workers in situations where they don't belong.
Sorry, I had a hard time hearing that one because some jackass brought his baby to a city council meeting. There's more. We'll get back to it.
All right. We've got 2 more hours coming up on the John Phillips Show. Hey, it's Jimmy Buffett Friday. The weekend's almost here. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.